Today we are checking out the brand new Void Gauntlet. We're going to look at all the abilities, basically just look over everything it has to offer. This is in the PTR, so it is up to be changed. I'm sure some of the numbers will be changed before it goes live, but as far as the abilities go, I would assume they would stay pretty much the same. Trying to get away from these people because everybody's screaming. Find some enemies that we can fight and look through some of the abilities that the Void Gauntlet's going to give us. Let's head over here, hit some pigs. We'll look at the both primary and secondary attacks. So the primary attack is just a light projectile that you throw out. I didn't put any of my points into my attributes yet, so this is just straight out of the gate. I believe that this gauntlet has 24 intelligence on it and vicious, so plus 9.7 increased critical damage. So the light attack's hitting for 403 here. Heavy attack's hitting for 504. Pretty good. What's pretty awesome is if you go down and start running out of mana, so I'm going to just use a bunch of mana here. You can actually, if you use right click, it's going to take a chunk of your health and then give you back. It looked like about 20 mana. It took, I believe that was about 800 health. I didn't get to see before it started healing, but about 800 health to give you 20 more mana. So if you're in a pinch, you think you're going to kill somebody real quick, and you have a little bit of health to spare, you can sacrifice your health and regen your mana quicker so that you can finish them off fast. So looking at our attributes, the Void Gauntlet is going to have a primary attribute of intelligence and a secondary of focus. So it's one of the two weapons now that actually scale with focus. So they did give us maximum level for the Void Gauntlet. We're going to look through some of the abilities here. We got the skill tree of Annihilation and Decay. On the Annihilation side, we have Void Blade, which is going to summon a blade of void energy that converts your basic attack to melee. Tap basic attack to perform a quick slash that deals 100% weapon damage, or hold to perform a thrust attack that deals 150% weapon damage. Both attacks inflict disintegrate on successful hits, dealing 5% weapon damage per second and reducing damage absorption by 5% for 8 seconds. Stacks up to 3 times. So in simpler terms, it basically makes your weapon a melee weapon that applies a dot that can stack. Second ability we have is Oblivion. This is going to summon a circular rift of void energy at your feet that deals 30% weapon damage per second to enemies and grants empowers to self and friendlies, increasing damage by 20%. It's got a 5-meter radius and lasts 6 seconds. This is an AoE ability that does go around you. I actually want to see if this follows you around after you cast it or if it's stationary. It is stationary. So this is going to do damage to enemies and empower yourself. It also empowers friendlies. Third ability is Petrifying Scream. This unleashes a void-infused scream, dealing 100% weapon damage, staggering and inflicting root to enemies 5 meters in front of you, disables enemy movement for 2 seconds. So it does damage and then roots enemies, making it so they can't move. This thing looks sick. It looks like the sword from Halo. So there's a couple light attacks there. I think they're hitting for 237. Get a heavy attack. Heavy hits for 350. Light hit for 253. I don't know. Okay, so if you press Q, it will actually cancel the ability and bring it back to being a ranged ability. So let's throw this down and see how much damage it does. 71. Not too bad, not too bad. And it's got a pretty good radius on it. We're going to look through the passives that Annihilation gives you. First one is 10% damage while below 50% mana, so pretty strong. 10% critical chance while above 50% health. 10% critical chance while all abilities are on cooldown. 10% cooldown reduction on all abilities on critical hit. That's pretty nice right there. Especially if you can like get behind somebody. I actually want to see. I don't believe you can because it is a magic weapon. But can you headshot with this? I believe it's just a crit chance and not actually a headshot. But might as well test it. Yeah. So you can't headshot with it. And I'm assuming with the blade that you'll get a crit if you're behind the enemy. We'll test it out right here. Okay, so it does critical hit from the back. So I'll show you here too that the decay does the damage over time. Full ticks over 12. Slap him in the face with an orb. I like the backhand effect here. If you keep spraying it, you go back and forth with your arm. All right, so let's continue with the passives. So we do know that you can critical hit with the sword, which is going to make this passive stronger. We got empowering proximity. Gain in power when casting abilities within 5 meters of an enemy, increasing damage by 10% for 5 seconds, stacks up to 3 times. Efficiency harvest. Harvest essence health drain is reduced by 50% while below 25 mana. I'm assuming harvest essence is the right click that you can use to get mana back and trade for your health. Leeching Agony on critical hit, gain health equal to 15% of damage done. Refreshing Frailty, 5% cooldown reduction on all abilities when successful hitting enemies afflicted by 3 or more debuff stacks. Can be from different debuffs. And then the final passive is Void Color. On successful ability hit, gain a stack of Void Essence at 6 stacks. Consume all stacks and gain a 3-meter aura that heals self and friendlies for 30% weapon damage and deals 30% weapon damage per second to enemies within. Healing scales exclusively with focus. Ooh, that's kind of interesting. So if you're going to be relying on this, you're going to want to actually scale into focus, which is interesting that they put this on this side of the skill tree, because from what I was looking at before, it seems like this right side over here actually has a few more healing abilities, but we'll look through that in a second. Let's go back over here and actually look through the passives that are underneath the abilities. So underneath the blade, we have gain fortify on start, increasing damage absorption by 20% for 5 seconds. So that's pretty nice. It makes you a lot more tanky when you go in and start doing melee damage to your opponents. Vicious Void, 10% critical damage on void blade attacks. So again, that would be nice if you can get behind somebody and do some attacks. Successful thrust attacks heal self for 5% weapon damage per disintegrate stack on target. Scales exclusively with focus. Okay, so we got another one that scales exclusively with focus. It seems like the healing abilities that we have here are going to be really benefited by focus. I wonder if that's going to be the same on the right side of the skill tree, but we'll find out. And then moving over to Oblivion, which is the AoE ability, we have Withering Oblivion. Your attacks inflict weaken to targets inside the radius, reducing their damage by 5% for 5 seconds per hit, stacks up to 3 times. So this ability seems like it's going to be really strong in like Outpost Rush. If you can just get in, drop this, you're going to weaken a lot of your enemies that you can get inside of it and empower your teammates and heal your teammates. Actually, no, it does not heal your teammates. It just empowers them. But basically, it's going to be a really strong support ability that if your team's like running in a death ball and you drop this underneath them, this is going to be really, really strong. I think it's really going to come in handy when you're like taking points and there's just chaos going on in those Outpost Rush matches. Moving on, we got Invigorating Oblivion, which gives plus 15 stamina per second for self and friendlies while inside the radius. Again, it does make this stronger as a support ability. So as this goes on, it's making me think that this is kind of like almost a support tank role if you decide to go with a lot of the stuff from this side of the skill tree, which is pretty cool that this gauntlet offers you some versatility to it. You know, it's like usually if you're playing a weapon, you kind of play it in the same way, especially if it's like melee or ranged. But since this has like a mix to it, you can really switch up your play style depending on how you want to play with it. Underneath, Petrifying Scream, which is the root effect that we showed you. Actually, I want to check this root ability again now that I'm rereading it. I think if you have multiple in front of you, it's not necessarily a projectile, it's kind of like a cone. So let's see if this roots both of these. Yeah, so it does root both of them. Okay. It seems like it has a really short range there though. I want to cast it not on enemies so we can see the animation and kind of see the hitbox for it. It doesn't offer you a lot of distance with that ability. But if somebody's like pushing up on you, you can just scream at them real quick and root them in place and then do whatever you need to do once they're rooted. So underneath that ability, we have Bone Chilling Voice, root duration increased by 1 second on targets below 50% health. And then we have Fortifying Echoes, which is gain fortify for each enemy hit, increasing damage absorption by 10% for 10 seconds per hit, stacks up to 3 times. So see, if I read this earlier, I would know that you could hit multiple enemies. So if you hit 3 enemies, you're going to get 30% damage absorption for 10 seconds, which is pretty nice. And it's going to add, again, like I said, it's almost like an off tank roll is what it seems to be. But let's jump over to the Decay skill tree and look at these skills over here. First one, we have Orb of Decay. This is fire an unblockable orb that passes through enemies, dealing 100% weapon damage and inflicts Disintegrate, which is that dot, dealing 5% weapon damage per 5 seconds and reducing damage absorption by 5% for up to 8 seconds. Stacks up to 3 times. At max range, it transforms into a healing orb and returns healing friendlies for 20% weapon damage per second for 5 seconds. Healing scales exclusively with focus. So yeah, it seems like if you are trying to play the Void Gauntlet as a damage weapon, you're going to want to go into intelligence, whereas if you want to go into it as more of a healer role, that you're going to want to definitely go into focus. What's interesting is because it's a secondary attribute, it actually doesn't say whether or not it's a secondary. Now that I look at it, so if you look when you scroll over the question mark, it says Fire Staff and Ice Gauntlet are the primary for intelligence and secondary are Rapier and Musket. So I'm assuming because the secondary weapons here are kind of grayed out when they're secondaries, that focus is going to be a secondary attribute for it, but it's not clearly specified. So I'm just assuming off of the colors of these gauntlets that focus is the secondary attribute for this. Kind of interesting. So it seems like it's not going to be as effective for healing as a lot of people would like it to be. But anyways, let's move on and check on these other abilities. We got Baleful Tether. Fire a projectile that tethers you to an enemy, weakening it and empowering you by 4% per second, 20% maximum. The tether ends if the target moves beyond 15 meters. So for this, it looks like something's going to attach to your enemy. You have to stay close to it, and it'll continue to make you stronger and stronger the longer that you stay near it. So I feel like this ability is going to pair well with the sword, right? So you pop this as you go in, and then you pop the sword, and the longer that you're near the enemy doing the sword damage to them, that it's going to make you stronger and stronger. So if you're going the sword route, it seems like this is something that you're going to want to go for. We'll look through the passives in a little bit and see if those add anything to it. But the last ability is Essence Rupture. Fire a projectile that inflicts Essence Rupture for 10 seconds, healing anyone that hits the target for 20% of the damage done. Does not apply to damage over time. So this is really nice. Again, this is going to be really good if you and your teammates are focusing down the same person. I'm hoping it has a clear animation tied to it so your teammates can easily see who has Essence Rupture on them and can focus them down. If it does have that, it's going to be really good because it basically increases your communication with your team without even having to do anything. You just cast it on somebody, and if they see it, then they know to focus down that person, and it's really going to allow your team to focus down people pretty quickly. So let's throw a couple of these out, see what they look like. First one is Orb of Decay. Throw it out. Oh, cool. It's got a really good animation tied to it there. If you saw, while it's going out, it's purple, so that means it's doing damage, and when it comes back, it's green, so that's the time that it's actually going to be healing. It says it heals friendlies. I don't know if it actually heals yourself. I'm going to take some damage here and see if it's just friendlies. It didn't say what was the radius on it. Healing friendlies for 20% weapon damage for 5 seconds. Okay, so it's actually when the orb passes through friendlies. So I don't think... Let's see if I take damage. I don't think if it passes through enemies that it's going to heal you. All right. Beat me up. Slap me around. Call me names. Okay, so it does look like it's healing me when it comes back to me over time. I'm assuming that it's going to heal your teammates as it goes through them when it comes back, and it's not going to be like an AoE radius to heal people around you, because that just wouldn't make sense. Oh, I tried to use my tether ability there, but it didn't. You actually have to aim it at somebody. So let's see this tether here. So here's this. It's got a pretty cool little animation to go along with it. It almost looks spacey. And then again, the longer that you have that attached to the person, the more damage that you're going to do, and also the less damage that they're going to do. So the last one is the ability that I was saying. If it has a good animation on it, it's going to really help teams focus down players. So the damage that we're going to do to this enemy here is going to heal whoever's attacking it. So whether it's me or a friendly, we can both gain health for it, and that's why I was saying that it's going to really help with focusing down enemies, which I think a lot of teams struggle with. Oh my god, I missed. Okay, so they do have a small animation under their feet, which I think is going to be pretty tough to actually see when you're in those really big battles. So I don't know how good that's going to be for getting teammates to focus them down. I think I would like for it to be a better animation. You can kind of tell. But it's going to be hard to see how that's going to work until you actually get in there and you're doing like those 20-on-20 battles or the wars. So let's check the passives for this side now. So we'll go through the ability ones first this time. For Decaying Orb, which is the orb that goes out, does damage, and then heals on the way back. You gain 5% mana per enemy hit by the orb. That's really good. You can kind of spam it and then throw it through groups of enemies. Slowing Orb. The orb slows enemies already afflicted by any debuff, reducing their movement speed by 30% for 3 seconds. So if you combine this with the Root ability, it seems like you can really CC them and kind of keep them in place for a long time, because the Root has a 2-second root and then a 3-second root if they're below 50% health, and you have this, and then so they'll be rooted in place, not able to move at all for 3 seconds, and if you hit them with the orb right as that's ending, then they'll be slowed for another 3 seconds, and you'll be able to have like a crazy amount of CC on them for a long time. And the final ability is Detonating Orb. Pressing the ability input again to detonate the orb with a 4-meter explosion radius. Depending on the orb's phase, the explosion will either damage enemies for 100% weapon damage and apply stacks of Disintegrate, which again is the dot, or heal friendlies for 70% weapon damage. Healing scales exclusively with focus. So again, if you are going to run this weapon and you want to be more of a healer role, you're going to have to really scale into focus, or at least go like hybrid into focus. Going over to the Tether, we have successful hits against the tethered target reduce other Void Gauntlet cooldowns by 5%. So that's pretty nice, especially with, again, I think this is going to be really good with the sword, because the sword has a 25-second cooldown. So 5% of 25 seconds would be a second and a quarter. So you hit somebody 4 times and it's going to cut 5 seconds off that cooldown, which is pretty strong. And I actually want to see if that cooldown is based off of when you pop the blade or when the blade goes away. I believe it's based off when you pop the blade, so then the blade is up for 15 seconds, and then if you have it out the entire time, then you'll have a 10-second cooldown. So you'll most likely be able to keep that blade up. If you have the blade and the tether, you'll be able to keep the blade up almost indefinitely if you're really close and landing a lot of hits on them. Again, going back to the tether, the next passive is 100% mana regeneration while the tether is active. So you're basically just not going to run out of mana. And then Soul Eater, which is regain 80% weapon damage as health if the tethered target dies. Scales exclusively with focus. So this is going to be stronger with the in PvE, because again, if you're doing like a lot of PvP, once you get the kill, usually the fight's over, especially in like 1v1s. But if you're fighting like maybe if you're running and going like a 1v2, 1v3, this could come in handy, because it is 80% weapon damage. And then the regular passives are going to be Deadly Range, 10% damage on successful ranged heavy attacks against targets more than 8 meters away. Fervent Thirst, plus 5% mana per successful ranged light attack against targets afflicted by your Void Gauntlet debuffs. So it seems like you're going to be able to keep your mana up for a long time if you go into the skill tree. Refreshing Harvest. Cooldowns are reduced by 10% per second while performing Harvest Essence, which again, I believe the Harvest Essence is when you take your health and replace it with mana. So that's pretty good. Again, I would say if somebody's low and you're really running low on mana, or you just need to use an ability, that you can finish them off really easily if you use this passive. It seems like the Harvest Essence is really going to help you secure kills, but we'll see how it goes actually once you get it in combat. Radiant Efficiency at mana costs are reduced by 25% while above 50% mana. So again, just wants you to have infinite mana basically. Leeching Bolts. Healing from ranged heavy attacks is increased by an additional 30% of damage dealt if the target is below 50% health. So does that mean that this weapon actually heals just off its passive, so it has like a built-in lifesteal? Oh, I was looking away. 957. So yeah, it does look like it heals you when you land heavy attacks at least. Let's see if it heals you on light attacks. So it doesn't heal you with light attacks, but it does heal you with heavy attacks. Interesting. So that gives you an increased reason to use light attacks, especially while like kiting somebody around with it. It seemed like it healed for quite a bit as well. And then if you pair that along with the Leeching Bolts passive, it's another 30% of damage dealt. So you'll heal yourself a lot by using this. That's crazy. That means that you're going to be like really hard to kill. I'm really interested to see how this is going to play out in PvP. Hopefully we don't end up with just heavy armor people staying alive forever. I don't think anybody wants more of that. Extended Suffering. Successful ranged heavy attacks increase the duration of non-crowd controlled debuffs you have applied by 10%. Okay, so that would be your Oblivion and your Tether. So what's kind of interesting is this is successful ranged heavy attacks. So it's going to be kind of difficult to manage your range while you're doing the tether, at least. Oblivion would be good, and then Essence Rupture would be good as well. I actually want to see the range of the tether here. So it seems like it's not terribly bad. 15 meters, like I got some good distance. So it's not terribly hard to manage, but again, it's going to be something that you are going to have to manage. You're going to have to be pretty close range if you want to use that passive with the tether. Then we have Mending Evasion. Dodging with full mana heals you for 80% weapon damage, scales exclusively with focus. Wow, so that's really going to put you into like a kiting mode. It seems like this weapon's going to be really, really fun to try to kite people around, because it doesn't seem like it's going to be easy necessarily to kite people, but it seems like if you can successfully kite, that you're going to be able to get really good benefits off of it. So that's really cool. It seems like it's got a pretty high skill ceiling to it. And the final passive is Glimpse of the Void. Gain a stack of Void Essence per successful ability hit. At 4 or more stacks, your next successful ranged heavy attack will instantly reset all Void Gauntlet cooldowns or move all stacks. So if you hit 4 abilities in a row, it's going to reset all of your cooldowns. So I wonder if that counts as sword hits. And I also wonder if that counts with the Orb of Decay on the way there and the way back. Does that count as 1 or 2? Also, it seems like if you just have somebody in the Oblivion, that each tick would work. But I don't know if the stacks would work with damage over time. I want to test some of this stuff. So let's, I'm just going to grab, let's do the Void Blade, Oblivion. And then we wanted the Orb of Decay. Let's max that out. Let's do the health. Just throw a bunch of stuff in here. We already have 3 abilities. And then we can go ahead and get this. So I want to see the stacks here. So I got a sword. 1, 2, 3. Oh, that was only 3. So it does look like it stacks. If you look in the middle on the bottom there. So now let's pop the sword again. And I actually wanted to see if I put my weapon away and pull it back out. Okay, so that gets rid of your sword. So if you're like trying to animation cancel with your dodge and you have your sword out, that's really going to screw you over. At 4 or more stacks, your next successful ranged heavy attack will instantly reset. Oh, your next successful ranged heavy attack. Okay. I want to see Void Essence that builds towards your ultimate ability. Duration resets when new stacks are applied. Okay, so it did look like it stacked there. Maybe it has to be different abilities, but you don't even have 4 abilities. So here we go. 1, 2, oh, dodged it. 2, 3. And if I come back over here, we go 4. And then put the sword away. Go there. There you go. And it refreshed. So it does count with your sword. 1, 2. Those ones weren't applying for some reason. I'm not sure if it's bugged or if I'm missing something. Was it on cooldown possibly? Yeah, it does have a 15-second cooldown. Okay. So it was just on cooldown. So let's see if this works with that ability. Does not. So yeah, it works with the sword. It works with the orb, and it looked like it only worked with the orb once. But I'll try it again just to clarify. So yeah, it did only stack once there. That doesn't reset it. This does. So it does reset the timer every time you hit somebody. But you have to hit them with 4 abilities. So it would be like 4 sword slashes, and then you have to hit them with a heavy ranged attack, I believe it said. Yeah, so it's a heavy ranged attack. So I think if you want to play more ranged, what you'd want to do is probably run Petrifying Scream, which is the root. You're going to want to run the orb. And then you could probably run one of the 3, Oblivion, the Tether, or Essence Rupture. Whereas it seems like if you want to go with the sword, you probably want Void Blade. You probably want Oblivion, since you're going to be fighting in that close range. And I would say either the Tether or the the Essence Rupture, depending on what you want, because the Essence Rupture is going to heal you. So you're going to have a bit more lifesteal with it. And then Baleful Tether is just going to make it so you kill somebody faster and you can tank a little bit more. So I would think the Tether would be if you're going more of a DPS role, and the Rupture would be more if you want to go like a tankier role. So this is really cool. It seems like it's really versatile, that you can run it as a DPS, a tank, or a healer. And I don't know if it would work as a main healer or a main tank, but it seems to be a really strong support role that's going to be good for solo players, but really come into its own when you're playing with a team. Let me know what you think about the Void Gauntlet down below. If you enjoyed, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and check out the video right here. Thanks for watching.